A fist crashed into the side of a jaw so hard the mouthpiece flew into the third row. His opponent hit the canvas face first. Didn't even try to catch himself. The referee waved it off before the count started. Nobody in that arena moved. 20,000 people sat there, mouths open, trying to understand what they'd just seen. A 20-year-old kid. Thick neck. Short. 220 pounds of muscle. He didn't celebrate. Didn't raise his arms. He just walked back to his corner like he'd done something ordinary. His name was Mike Tyson. And that night, he became the youngest heavyweight champion the world had ever seen. But here's the thing nobody talks about. What happened after the belts, after the fame, after the hundreds of millions? What did the world do to Mike Tyson, and what did he do to himself? Stay with me on this 1.to understand what Mike Tyson became. You need to understand where he started. And where he started was the bottom. Brownsville, Brooklyn. Not the Brooklyn you see now with the coffee shops and the bike lanes. This was the late 70s. Brownsville was one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in New York City. Drug corners on every block. Buildings burned out and left standing like skeletons. Families crammed into apartments that should have been condemned. And right there, in the middle of all that, was a little kid named Michael Gerard Tyson. He was soft. That's the part nobody expects. He was short, pudgy, had a high voice, wore thick glasses, and he got bullied constantly. The older kids in the neighborhood picked on him every single day. Took his food. Took his money. Beat him when he didn't have any. His mother worked but couldn't hold things together. His father was gone. Just gone. That was it. By the time Tyson was 10 years old, he was getting arrested. Petty theft. Breaking into stores. Running with older kids who used him because he'd do whatever they told him. Before his 11th birthday, he'd been arrested over 30 times. Think about that. A child. 30 arrests. Nobody was coming to help this kid. Nobody was paying attention. The system processed him and sent him right back out. Then he got sent to a juvenile detention center upstate. Tryon School for boys. And that's where his life split in two. A counselor there named Bobby Stewart was a former boxer. Golden Gloves winner. He noticed something about Tyson that nobody else had. This kid, this quiet, chubby, bullied kid, could hit. Not just hard. Freakishly hard. Stewart started training him, but it didn't take long to realize this was beyond what he could teach. So he made a phone call. He called Cuz D'Amato. Now here's the thing about Cuz D'Amato. He was an old man by then. 70s. He'd already trained champions. Floyd Patterson. Jose Torres. He didn't need another fighter. But Stewart brought Tyson to the gym, and Cuz watched this 13-year-old throw punches, and he said something that everyone who was there remembers. He said, "That's the heavyweight champion of the world." 13 years old. Cuz didn't just train Tyson. He took him in, became his legal guardian, moved him into his house in Catskill, New York, a big Victorian home where Cuz had trained fighters for years. For the first time in his life, Tyson had a bed that was his, a room that was his, meals at a table, someone who asked him how his day went. Cuz taught him the peekaboo style. Hands up high, head moving constantly, explosive combinations from angles nobody expected. But more than technique, Cuz taught him something else. He taught him about fear. He told Tyson that fear was a friend. That every fighter feels it. That the difference between a champion and everybody else is what you do with that fear. You turn it into fire. And Tyson burned. He turned pro at 18. His first fight lasted 1 round. His second fight lasted 1 round. His third fight lasted 1 round. 19 fights. 19 knockouts. Most of them in the first round. Opponents didn't just lose. They folded. Crumbled. One guy tried to leave the ring before the bell because he'd watched the last fight on tape and decided he didn't want any part of it. By the time Tyson was 20, the whole sport knew what was coming. On November 22, 1986, he stepped into the ring against Trevor Berbick for the WBC heavyweight title. Second round. Berbick went down. Got up. Went down again. Got up again. Then went down a third time and his legs wouldn't work. They just wouldn't work. The referee stopped it. Mike Tyson was the youngest heavyweight champion in history, 20 years old. And America loved him. Not just boxing fans. Everyone. He was on magazine covers, talk shows, endorsement deals. He made $100 million before he turned 25. $100 million. A kid from Brownsville who used to steal quarters from laundromats. But here's what nobody was paying attention to. The one person who held all of this together. The one man who knew how to reach inside Tyson's head and keep him steady. Cuz D'Amato. Cuz was already dead. He died in November 1985. 1 year before Tyson won the title. He never saw his kid become champion. And Tyson had to walk into that ring knowing the only man who ever truly loved him wasn't there to watch. Believe me, that mattered more than any belt. And without Cuz, there was nobody left to stop what was coming. The moment Cuz was gone, the vultures showed up. First came Don King. If you don't know that name, here's all you need to know. Don King was a boxing promoter who had already been convicted of manslaughter, who had already been investigated for fraud, and who had already been accused by nearly every fighter he'd ever worked with of stealing their money. He was loud, he was smart, and he was ruthless. And he saw Mike Tyson the way a wolf sees a lamb that just lost its shepherd. King got into Tyson's ear, pushed out the people Cuz had trusted, replaced Tyson's trainer, Kevin Rooney, who had been with him since the D'Amato days. One by one, the people who actually cared about Tyson were removed. And in their place came a circle of yes-men, hangers-on, and people whose only interest was the money flowing out of Tyson's fists. Then came Robin Givens. Tyson married the actress in February 1988. He was 21. The marriage was a disaster from the start. There were reports of fighting, manipulation, control on both sides. But the moment that really tore Tyson open in front of the world happened on live television. Barbara Walters sat down with both of them for an interview on ABC. And right there on camera, Givens described living with Tyson as pure hell. She called him a manic depressive. She said she was scared of him. And Tyson just sat there. He didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He sat there with his head down while the whole country watched his wife tear him apart on national television. Now think about that. This was the most feared man on the planet. The man who made professional fighters freeze when the bell rang. And there he was, unable to say a single word while his marriage collapsed in front of 100 million viewers. Whatever wall he had built around himself, whatever armor the knockouts gave him, it cracked that night. Publicly. Permanently. The divorce came fast. Givens got a reported $10 million. Tyson got nothing but humiliation and tabloid covers. But even that wasn't the worst of it. Because the fights kept coming, and the knockouts kept coming, and everyone assumed Tyson was still invincible. He wasn't. February 11, 1990. Tokyo, Japan. Tyson stepped into the ring against Buster Douglas. Nobody gave Douglas a chance. The odds were 42-1 against him. His mother had just died weeks earlier. Most people thought the fight would last 3 rounds at most. It went 10. Douglas hit Tyson with a combination in the 10th round that put him on the canvas for the first time in his career. And the image that the whole world saw. Mike Tyson on the floor of a Tokyo ring, reaching around for his mouthpiece, trying to shove it back in with his glove, struggling to stand up before the count hit 10. He didn't make it. Buster Douglas knocked out Mike Tyson. The impossible happened. And it happened because Tyson had walked into that ring without discipline, without focus, without the structure that Cuz had built for him. He was partying until dawn, barely training, surrounded by people who told him he didn't need to. That loss was more than a loss. It was the first real crack in the myth. The first time the world saw that Mike Tyson was not a machine. He was a 23-year-old kid with no guidance and no one to tell him the truth. Then came 1991, a beauty pageant in Indianapolis. A woman named Desiree Washington accused Tyson of rape. The trial was ugly. Tyson's defense was a mess. In February 1992, he was found guilty, sentenced to 6 years in the Indiana Youth Center. He served 3. And just like that, the most famous athlete on earth was gone. No ring, no cameras, no entourage, just a cell and a number. Inside prison, something unexpected happened. Tyson converted to Islam. He read the Quran. He spent time with a Muslim chaplain who didn't want anything from him. For the first time since Cuz died, someone was in his life who wasn't trying to take. Tyson later said those years in prison were some of the most peaceful of his entire life. Quiet, structured, no one trying to get a piece of him. He came out in March 1995, and the world held its breath. His first fight back was against Peter McNeely. It lasted 89 seconds. Tyson destroyed him. The crowd lost their minds. Then he fought Frank Bruno. Third round knockout. Then Bruce Seldon. First round. One punch, really? And Seldon went down like he'd been dropped from a building. Tyson looked reborn. The punch was still there. The speed was still there. The menace in his walk, the black trunks, the no-robe entrance, the whole terrifying package. It was all back. The money started flowing again. The pay-per-view numbers broke records. The headlines went from Fallen Champion to The Return of Iron Mike. His team started talking about unifying the belts again. Commentators said he looked better than ever. There was real belief from the public, from the networks, from the promoters that Tyson had come back not just as a fighter but as a man. That prison had fixed what fame had broken. It looked like a second chance. A real one. The kind people make movies about. Tyson signed to fight Evander Holyfield. The biggest fight of the decade. 2 legends. 1 ring. And everyone watching believed they were about to see the old Tyson, the real Tyson, reclaim everything he'd lost. For a brief moment, it actually felt like the story might have a happy ending. Her name was Exodus. She was 4 years old. On May 25, 2009, Exodus was playing in the family's home in Phoenix, Arizona. A treadmill cord. That's all it was. A cord hanging from a treadmill in a room where a little girl was playing by herself. The cord wrapped around her neck. By the time her 7-year-old brother found her, she was unconscious and tangled in the machine. Paramedics arrived. They rushed her to the hospital. She was put on life support. She died the next day. Mike Tyson was not home when it happened. He got the call and drove to the hospital. And when he arrived, he had to walk into a room where his 4-year-old daughter was lying on a bed, with machines keeping her body alive, and nothing keeping her mind alive. He had to stand there while doctors explained there was nothing left to do. He had to be in that room when they turned the machines off. Now here's the thing. Tyson had taken punches from the hardest hitters on the planet. Lennox Lewis. Evander Holyfield. He'd had his face broken, his eye socket cracked, his body beaten for 20 years across hundreds of rounds of professional fighting. None of it touched this. Nothing in the ring came within 1,000 miles of what that hospital room did to him. He later said he wanted to die. Not as a figure of speech. He said he genuinely did not want to be alive anymore. He said the only reason he didn't act on it was because he had other children, and he knew what it felt like to grow up without a father. He refused to do that to them. But the desire to disappear, to just stop existing, he said that never fully left. After Exodus died, the drug use got worse. Much worse. Tyson described a period where he was using cocaine every single day, drinking from the moment he woke up, and going days without sleeping. He said he would sit in a room and just talk to himself for hours. No phone, no television. Just him and whatever was left of his mind after the substances got through with it. He ballooned in weight. He stopped training entirely. He stopped leaving the house. People who visited him during that time said he was unrecognizable. Not just physically. His eyes were different. The energy that used to fill any room he walked into was gone. He was quiet, flat. He answered questions in 1 or 2 words. The man who once held press conferences that made reporters flinch was sitting in a chair staring at a wall. Believe me, this is the part of the story that matters more than any belt or any knockout. Because what happened next is the reason we're still talking about Mike Tyson. He didn't get better all at once. There was no single moment, no dramatic turning point. It was slow, ugly, full of relapses. But somewhere in the middle of all of it, Tyson made a decision. He was going to tell the truth. Not the version his promoters wanted. Not the version the media had built. His truth. All of it. Every terrible thing he'd done. Every terrible thing that was done to him. He was going to say it out loud and let people decide what to make of it. In 2012, he partnered with Spike Lee to create a one-man show. It was called Mike Tyson, Undisputed Truth. He stood on a stage alone, no gloves, no opponent, and he talked. For 90 minutes, he talked about his childhood, about cuz, about prison, about the drugs, about Exodus. He cried on stage. Multiple times. He told stories that made audiences go silent. Not because they were dramatic, because they were real. Painfully, uncomfortably real. The show was a hit. But more than that, it changed how people saw him. For decades, the public narrative was simple. Tyson was a monster, an animal, a cautionary tale about what happens when you give a violent man too much money and not enough supervision. That was the story. And Tyson stood on that stage and said, yeah, some of that's true, but here's the rest of it. Here's the kid who got beaten every day. Here's the kid who watched his mother sell herself to keep the lights on. Here's the man who trusted the wrong people because he'd never been taught what trust was supposed to look like. He didn't ask for sympathy. That's the part that surprised people. He didn't make excuses. He just laid it all out and let it sit there. After the show, he started a podcast. Hot Boxin' with Mike Tyson. And on that podcast, something remarkable happened. Tyson became one of the most honest public figures in America. He talked about mental health before it was trendy. He talked about addiction without sugarcoating it. He talked about masculinity, about vulnerability, about crying, about being afraid. Former opponents came on the show. Old rivals. People he'd hurt. And he sat across from them and listened. Really listened. The man who once said he wanted to eat Lennox Lewis's children at a press conference was now sitting across from people and asking them how they felt. Not performing. Not promoting. Just asking. It didn't erase anything. It didn't undo the damage or bring back the years or bring back Exodus. But it did something that Tyson had never been able to do in the ring. It let people see him. Not Iron Mike. Not the baddest man on the planet. Just Mike. A 50-year-old man who'd been through more than most people could survive, trying to figure out how to live with all of it. At 59 years old, Mike Tyson lives in a way that would confuse the 20-year-old version of himself. He wakes up early. He prays. He spends time with his wife, Lakia, who has been with him since 2009. They have 2 children together, Milan and Morocco. He drives them to school some mornings. Not a driver. Him. He walks them to the door and watches them go inside. He has a house. Not a mansion. A house. There's no staff of 200. No Bengal tigers in the yard. No fleet of cars he'll never drive. He lives simply by his own standards and by anyone else's. He said in interviews that he doesn't miss the money. Not even a little. He said the money was the thing that made everyone come, and the thing that made everyone leave. He still keeps pigeons. That might sound like a small detail. It isn't. Tyson has been raising pigeons since he was a kid in Brownsville. Before boxing. Before cuz. Before any of it. When he was 9 years old, getting bullied and robbed every day, the one place he felt safe was on a rooftop with his birds. He'd go up there and watch them fly in circles above the neighborhood. Nobody bothered him up there. Nobody wanted anything from him. It was the only peace he had. And now, at 59, he still goes up to tend his birds. He holds them in his hands. He watches them take off and come back. He said that pigeons are the only living things that never disappointed him. They don't lie. They don't steal. They don't leave when the money runs out. They just come back. There's something in that image. A man who once terrified every heavyweight on the planet, standing on a roof, holding a bird in his palms, and feeling more at ease than he ever felt in a boxing ring. In November 2024, Tyson did something that most people in his life begged him not to do. He fought Jake Paul, a YouTuber turned boxer, 27 years old. Tyson was 58. The fight was sanctioned, promoted on Netflix, and sold as an event. But anyone who watched it saw the truth within the first 30 seconds. Tyson's body didn't answer the way it used to. His hands were slower. His legs were heavier. He threw punches that would have ended careers 30 years ago, but now they landed short or not at all. Paul won on points. It wasn't close. After the fight, a reporter asked Tyson if he regretted it. He said no. He said he wanted to see what he had left. And now he knew. That was enough for him. But the image that stayed with people wasn't anything that happened in the ring. It was the walk out. Before the fight, Tyson walked from the tunnel to the ring, and the entire stadium stood up. Not because they thought he'd win. Because they knew what it cost him to be there. The scars. The losses. The years. They stood because the man walking toward them had survived things that would have destroyed almost anyone else. And he was still walking. Tyson talks about death now. Openly. Calmly. He said he knows he's closer to the end than the beginning. And he doesn't fear it. He feared it for years. After Exodus died, he feared everything. But somewhere along the way, he stopped running. He said the scariest thing in his life was never an opponent. It was silence. Being alone with his own thoughts. And he finally learned to sit with that. He visits Cuz D'Amato's grave. Not on anniversaries. Not for cameras. Just when he needs to. He stands there and talks to the old man. Thanks him. Apologizes to him. Tells him about the kids. He said those visits are the closest thing he has to church. He still carries Exodus with him every day. He doesn't talk about her in every interview anymore. But when her name comes up, his voice changes. It drops. It slows. You can hear the weight of it even through a microphone. He said he'll never get over it. He doesn't want to. Getting over it would mean forgetting. And he'd rather carry the pain than lose a single memory of her face. This is where Mike Tyson's story sits right now. Not in the highlight reels. Not in the knockouts. Not in the scandals or the headlines or the memes that turned his face into a punchline. It sits in a quiet house with a woman who stayed, children who need him, and pigeons on the roof. The fist that once crashed into the side of a jaw so hard a mouthpiece flew into the third row. That same fist now shakes a little when he picks up a coffee cup. He's talked about that too. No shame. No sadness. Just fact. The body keeps a record of everything you put it through, and Tyson put his through more than almost any athlete who ever lived. But he's here. That's the part that matters. After Brownsville, after Cuz dying, after prison, after the money disappearing, after Exodus, after all of it. He's still here. Slower. Softer. Honest in a way that the young Tyson would have mistaken for weakness. He's not the baddest man on the planet anymore. He's something harder to be. He's a man who looked at everything he destroyed and everything that was destroyed in him, and decided to keep living anyway. And some mornings, he still goes up to the roof to watch his birds fly.